is it just me, or have you been craving real, genuine connection? Real, genuine things. Getting out in nature, getting off your screen, right? I don't know if it's just me, but I've been really craving that sort of thing for quite some time, maybe the past 2-3 years, which is why I really struggled with social media. I was listening to a podcast recently that was talking about how we've moved into the age of the artificial, is what they called that. And I really resonated with that. To circle back to social media, I mean, social media is a beautiful thing in many ways, right? It allows us to connect with other people and allows me to connect with you all through a screen, right? But social media is artificial because we can craft whatever story, whatever narrative we want for what we want our life to look like. I could craft myself to look hyper spiritual and to put that on a YouTube channel, but the truth is nobody even knows who I am, and I'm not hyper spiritual, right? Whatever story we want to make, we can make that on social media. I saw a story recently, which is super sad and unfortunate, where a mother who was teaching people online how to parent their kids ended up getting arrested for child abuse and just awful things. And it just goes to show, right? Social media is artificial. We don't know what lies behind the screen. And so the question for today's episode, for this month's episode, is what is the role of the church in the age of the artificial? So that's what I want us to dive into today. And to me, 2 scriptures stood out. Matthew 5:36-37 and 1 Samuel 8:6-9. So I want us to start with Matthew chapter 5, verses 36 and 37. Actually, I'm going to read all the way from 33. It says, this is verse 33. It says, "Again, you have heard that the ancients were told, 'You shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord.' But I say to you, take no oath at all, neither by heaven, for it is the throne of God, nor by earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you take an oath by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. But make sure your statement is yes, yes, or your statement no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil origin." This scripture to me really impacted my life because I don't think we treat language in the way that it should be treated. We take language and our words that we say very lightly, and Jesus tells us to do the opposite, to take everything we say very seriously. Jesus in this passage shows us that he wants our language to be genuine and to be real, right? When we say yes, we have to mean it. If we don't think that we can follow through with whatever we're saying, then we shouldn't say yes. And with our no's, we should say no, and we should be genuine at that moment whenever we say what we are saying. I got my attic insulated recently. It was, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago. And it was pretty funny. It's really funny looking back. But basically, you need a receipt to get money back from your utilities company. And so when I got the attic insulated, I paid the people, and I was like, okay, I need the receipt so that I can get money back. And, I called the guy the day of. They directed me to like the owner of the company or whatever, and I called the guy and I was like, hey, can I get my receipt? They said you could give me the receipt, and he was like, oh yeah, sure. And he was like, I'll get it to you by the end of the day. And I didn't get it that day. I was like, oh, whatever, maybe he got busy. And so I waited a week, and I waited 2 weeks, and I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe he forgot. So I called him again, or I think I texted him, and he texted me back, and he was like, oh yeah, I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you as soon as I get back to the office. Don't worry about it. And that day, nothing. And I think I waited another week or two. I texted him again. There was no response. Maybe this is like 2 months later. I call him and I'm like, listen, man, like I really need this receipt because, you know, I can get $250 back or whatever it was. It was a decent amount of money. And finally he was like, yeah, I'll get it to you. And he finally got it to me. But it was funny because he would, every single time that I interacted with him, he would say, yes, I'll get it to you in like an hour. I'll get it to you as soon as I get back to the office. And then he wouldn't do it. And it was really frustrating because I'd rather him just be like, hey, I'll get it to you in like 2 months. You know, give me 2 months, I'll get it to you. To me, that would have been better. And so, you know, Jesus tells us this, to make our language count, to not say things that we're not going to follow through with. And so when it comes to the age of the artificial, right, this is teaching us that Jesus wants the church to be genuine. Jesus wants the church to have language that's meaningful, genuine, and honest. So going on to this next passage, this is 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 6 through 9. So it says here, but the matter was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when Israel said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people regarding all that they say to you, because they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. Like all the deeds which they have done since the day that I brought them up from Egypt, even to this day, in that they have abandoned me and served other gods, so they are doing to you as well. Verse 9, now then listen to their voice, however you shall warn them strongly and tell them of the practice of the king who will reign over them. So, in this scripture, Israel didn't have a king, right? Right before this, it was the judges, which were not exactly kings. They were rulers in some ways, but they were not a king, the traditional kind of king that we think of. But if you read this passage right here, they talk about how Israel was seeing all these nations around them that had kings, and they wanted one for themselves. They wanted a king. And, you know, you can't blame them because life under the rulers, under the judges, the book of Judges, life was rough, right? I mean, it was going bad. It was real bad. And so I think they saw the kings around them and thought, maybe this is going to solve our answer. Or maybe this is going to solve our problem. Maybe this is going to give us the answer. But that's the exact problem. And I think that's the problem that God is pointing out here, that a king was not going to fix the problem. Only God can fix a broken nation, but Israel wanted to replace God with a king, with an earthly king. We have the elections coming up in the United States in a couple months, and I can't help but think about how we as Christians do this all the time. We think that this next president is going to either ruin society or maybe the next president is going to save our society. We as Christians do this all the time. We try to put an earthly replacement where the only true Savior should be Jesus. We try to put people in the throne that only Jesus belongs in. We think that these presidents or whatever, our next elected officials are going to save the world. But the truth is, Jesus is the only one who can save the world and who has come to save the world, to save each of us. The deeper thing, I think, behind this passage, and it's why I wanted to bring it up today, is we have a tendency within us to want we have a desire within us to replace God with some kind of a knockoff brand, right? A kind of earthly substitute. And we do this with much more than God. We do this with anything that is holy, right? We replace love with lust. We replace spiritual wealth with worldly wealth, thinking that they're equal, that both will give us satisfaction. We replace real life adventures with video games and movies, right? We do this all the time. And I'm talking to myself here, right? Another one is we replace in-person gatherings with Zoom meetings, right? And I know what you're thinking, that's too much, Zoom meetings aren't evil. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying Zoom meetings are evil. I'm not saying video chats are evil. I'm not saying YouTube is evil, or else I wouldn't post this video, right? But I am saying that we tend to replace what I believe was made to be authentic, genuine, and real. We replace these things with something fake, something that was not meant to be there. Zoom meetings are great, but they cannot replace real, genuine human connection that God has made us for. God made us for genuine, real connection with Him and with each other. We cannot replace that. So back to the question, what can the church do? Because that's what I want to get at. We've talked about the problem, the kind of deep spiritual problem behind it, but what can the church do about this? Three things came to mind for me. Nature, art, and honesty. Starting with nature. It sounds weird. How can nature be something that's involved with the church? And what does it have to do with Christianity? Well, I think of the story of Job. At the end of the story of Job, God gives an answer to Job after Job has been seeking Him all this time. God gives an answer to Job, and God goes on this long monologue talking about, basically telling Job to get outside and go see God's creation. Go see the animals. Go see all these things. And He's basically telling Job, you did not make these things. You didn't make these things. I made them. I rule over the world. And there's something so humbling and so freeing about that. To get out in nature and realize we did not make this world. We did not make the ocean. We did not make the trees. We did not make the sand, right? We cannot make artificial versions of these things. We can, we can pour snow on a ski slope and ski down it, sure. But is it the same? I would argue it's not. We did not make the beautiful earth that God has made. And I think there's something very healing about getting out in nature. And so as a church, I think we can encourage people to get out in nature, to get outside, to turn off our phones, because there is something healing in our spirit that can happen when we get outside and we listen to the birds and we experience God's creation. So that's number one, nature. Number two, art. Art is, obviously, it has a soft spot in my heart because I have played music my whole life and it's changed my life. It brought me to God. And that's a story for another day. But art is a beautiful thing because, again, I think that it cannot be replaced by the artificial. I believe that art is something that will last through this age of the artificial. And I believe it's what people are craving. I think that's why, if you go on social media, you'll see so much Christian music now that's like all these different genres, right? And I'm a part of that, right? I've been trying to do different genres with Christian music, and I think a reason we've had so much of that coming up is because people are craving genuineness, right? Country music kind of went into a phase, at least for a long time, maybe it's still there in a lot of ways, where it was so industrialized, right? It turned into a kind of factory, right? Where you put these lyrics in, you put these things in, and you have a hit song, right? And then the artist would go out and sing them, which was a move away from genuine country music. And Christian music, I think, did the same thing. Christian music started with this, genuine Christian music, but we've kind of industrialized it in a lot of ways. But I think now people are moving away from that. I think art is at the root of genuine, real connection. And I believe that the church should be at the forefront of making the most beautiful pieces of art, of music, of graphic design, of brand design, of architecture, whatever. I believe the church should be at the root of that movement, at the forefront of that movement. And I think in a lot of ways throughout history, the church has been. And so again, one last thing I want to mention with art before we move on is Bezalel in Exodus. He's the first one in the scriptures to be recorded that says he was filled with the Spirit. And what was he? What did he do? He was an artist. He was helping build the tabernacle, right? Art is a beautiful thing that God has designed us for. He's designed each of us to be creative. Whether you believe you're creative or not, He has designed each of us to be creative. And so again, art is something that I believe can help us in this age of the artificial that the church should take up. Lastly, honesty. I don't have to talk too much about this, right? Jesus makes it very clear that the church should be at the forefront of honesty. Jesus says, don't bring a gift to the altar before reconciling with your brother and sister. And why does he say that? Because we are not meant to be torn from two sides, right? We're meant to either pursue holiness or to not, to pursue God's commandments or to not. We're not supposed to fake our spirituality. We're not supposed to fake like we have everything together. And we're supposed to reconcile with our brother and sister before we go and worship God. He tells us exactly that. He warns the Pharisees, right? That they're whitewashed tombs. And Jesus says the same thing to us. He does not want us to be whitewashed tombs, to look all nice and clean on the outside, but on the inside we're rotting away, right? Jesus wants us to be honest with ourselves, honest with each other. That is the only way forward, I believe, in life. That is the only way to truly experience what life was meant to be. The church should be at the forefront of being honest, and we haven't always done that. Of course we haven't always done that because the church has been led by humans in a lot of ways. But God calls us into that. God calls us to pursue a life of honesty, a life of humility, a life of humbleness, a life of gentleness, a life of honesty. So those are my thoughts on the age of the artificial and what the church can and should be doing. So thanks for listening. If you made it all this way, I appreciate it. And I'd love to hear your own thoughts. What do you think about this? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear both sides always. What are your experiences with the age of the artificial? Are you feeling the same thing? Are you experiencing a craving, a desire for things that are genuine, for things that are real? If you are, I just encourage you to comment to let me know, because I would love to hear your thoughts. I want to know that I'm not talking to a void. I want to know that I'm talking to people who are hearing me, understanding me, and who are truly getting to know the person of Jesus through this. So again, let me know your thoughts. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.